In the shadow of dusk, the mahogany courtroom seemed to soak in the weight of inheritance and unspoken family politics. Dana stood near the back, arms folded tightly across her chest, watching as the family's lawyer shuffled the stack of official documents. Her stomach churned, not from nerves, but from the eerie calm that had settled in the room like fog before a storm. It was the reading of her great-uncle Horace's final will. Horace Barrington had been a quiet storm of a man, wealthy from old oil money, shrewd with business, and unyielding in his beliefs. The Barrington estate sprawled over hundreds of acres in the Carolinas and included vineyards, antique cars, and a private art collection so valuable that even whispers of it invited appraisers. Dana wasn't expecting much. She wasn't close to Horace, and their last conversation, over 5 years ago, had ended with her challenging his outdated views on, well, everything. But there was still a flicker of hope. Maybe something small. A token gesture. A painting or an old watch, something symbolic, something that said, you mattered. Her father, Everett, sat stone-faced. Her stepmother, Clarice, wore an emerald green dress and a predatory grin. And her half-sister, Elena, the golden child, was practically glowing, basking in an anticipation she didn't bother to hide. Elena had always known how to curtsy into Horace's good graces, parroting back his opinions like they were gospel. Dana, on the other hand, had always questioned him, challenged him, corrected him. The lawyer finally cleared his throat. To Elena Barrington, he read, I leave the Barrington estate in its entirety, the land, the vineyards, the art, the vehicles, and all assets pertaining to the Barrington legacy. A gasp didn't echo through the room, because no one was surprised, except perhaps Dana, who blinked twice, trying to process the sheer breadth of what had just been said. Her mind clung to hope like a drowning swimmer clutching driftwood. And to Dana Whitmore, the lawyer continued with an uncomfortable glance in her direction, I leave the sum of $1. As a gesture. A gesture? Silence fell, so quiet that the grandfather clocks ticking on the far wall felt like a drumbeat. No one turned to look at her. No one whispered condolences. It was as if she'd simply faded from the room's architecture. Clarice smirked. Elena, with her practiced grace, looked over and smiled with her eyes half-lidded. $1's better than nothing, she said, voice sweet as vinegar. Don't spend it all at once. The others laughed. Her father didn't even look at her. Dana didn't laugh. She walked up, plucked the envelope from the lawyer's outstretched hand, and turned to leave without a word. The dollar bill inside crinkled as she shoved it into her coat pocket. Her steps echoed through the hallway like gunshots. That night, in her cramped studio apartment above a laundromat, Dana sat cross-legged on the floor beside her space heater. She'd spent the last of her checking account on bus fare to the estate reading. Her savings were gone, eaten by rent, overdue loans, and a failed business she'd tried to launch the year before. Now she was left with a single paper bill and a memory. She took the dollar out of the envelope and stared at it. It had a crease through Washington's face and a small coffee stain in the corner. It wasn't even crisp. Dana whispered into the dim room, don't spend it all at once. Her laugh cracked through the stillness like glass shattering. It wasn't a funny laugh, it was raw, jagged, a sound born from fury too thick to cry through. It wasn't just the inheritance. It was what it represented. It was the years of being told she was too opinionated, too different, too modern. It was the way her ideas were dismissed at the dinner table while Elena was praised for quoting Horace's own speeches back to him. It was every subtle punishment for being true to herself. When Dana was 12, Horace gave Elena a piano carved from imported rosewood and gave Dana a copy of The Art of War. You'll need this if you keep marching into battles, he had said with a smirk. When Dana was 17 and won a scholarship to study journalism, Horace told her the world didn't need more women asking questions. We need women who raise good families, he said. Like your sister will. That dollar was the final nail in a coffin they had spent her whole life building around her voice. Dana didn't sleep that night. She sat in front of her old laptop, fingers twitching, eyes darting through open browser tabs, financial forums, freelance websites, business idealists. She didn't know what she was looking for, but she knew she couldn't look away. It wasn't about revenge. Not yet. It was survival. It was defiance. It was proof. At 3:27 a.m., she clicked on a blog post, How I Turned $5 into $500 by Flipping Thrift Store Finds. She stared at the headline. Then she looked at the dollar again. And she whispered, let's see if you're worth more than the man who left you. This was the spark. Not a blaze, not yet. Just the flint striking stone. But even in that moment, Dana made a decision, not to spend the dollar, but to let it become the symbol of everything she would build without them. Her great-uncle Horace had left her with nothing. She would make everything from that. Dana stood in front of her bathroom mirror, brushing the wrinkles out of her only semi-professional shirt. The fabric was frayed at the collar and smelled vaguely of old detergent. She had a job interview, one of many she'd scrambled to line up after the reading of her great-uncle's will left her with just $1 and a bruised sense of dignity. 3 interviews today, 2 tomorrow. None of them her dream jobs. Most were minimum wage, overworked, and underappreciated positions. But she didn't have the luxury of choice. She'd been evicted from her last apartment due to late rent and now slept on a futon in the back of her friend's photo studio. Dana's bank account read -$3.47. Her pantry was empty. Her pride had taken a beating. Yet something inside her remained uncrushed, something sharp and defiant, fed not by revenge but by a quiet, growing fire, the need to prove she was more than what they'd left her with. She got the job at a nearby diner. The pay was humiliating, the hours punishing, and the management unforgiving. Still, she smiled through every shift, took extra hours no one else wanted, and learned the job with laser focus. But her mind was always elsewhere. She'd begun spending her nights scrolling through online articles, watching videos on entrepreneurship, side hustles, and financial literacy. She scribbled notes in a cheap spiral notebook. Reselling items equals low capital startup? Garage sales flip online. Success equals consistency plus scalability. One night, while taking out the trash behind the diner, Dana spotted a discarded lamp with a vintage metal base. It was dusty but intact. Something sparked in her mind. She took it home, cleaned it, polished it, and photographed it beneath a soft yellow light. Then she listed it on a resale app for $18. It sold within 5 hours. Her first sale. The rush she felt wasn't about the money. It was about agency. It was the first time she earned income on her own terms. No boss. No clock in. No fake smiles. With that $18, she took a bus to a flea market the next morning and scanned every corner for potential flips. She didn't know much about antiques or fashion, but she did know stories. She could craft a narrative for an old typewriter, a chipped teacup, a hand-stitched leather wallet. She'd majored in journalism, after all, something her family had deemed idealistic nonsense. She found a worn leather briefcase for $5, cleaned it with olive oil and elbow grease, and sold it a day later for $45. She started going to second-hand stores on her break hours, waking up at dawn to be first at neighborhood yard sales, haggling for discounts like her life depended on it, because it did. Every cent was reinvested. She learned how to photograph products, how to write persuasive copy, how to gauge market trends. Her notebook filled with data, best times to post, keywords that sold, items in demand. By the end of the month, Dana had made $1,200. It wasn't a lot, but to her it was everything. Still, the hustle came at a cost. Her social life disappeared. Her health took a dip. She went weeks without proper meals, functioning on instant noodles and leftover diner scraps. Her hands developed calluses from packing orders, and her back ached from crouching on the floor of the tiny storage corner she'd turned into her warehouse. One night, after 16 hours of nonstop work, she sat on the floor surrounded by packages, her body trembling from exhaustion. She stared at her reflection in the glass of a framed print she was about to ship. Pale face. Hollow eyes. She barely recognized herself. She almost quit. Almost. But then she remembered Elena's smug smile, the way Clarice had sipped wine during the will reading like she was watching a play, and how her father didn't even defend her when she was left with a single buck. Quitting wasn't an option. As her sales grew, Dana began experimenting with categories: vintage fashion, refurbished electronics, handmade decor. She joined online seller forums, took free courses on e-commerce, and watched webinars at 2 a.m. with bloodshot eyes and a notebook in hand. Her breakthrough came when she discovered a niche: mid-century home office decor. Vintage paperweights, brass desk clamps, industrial filing cabinets, items that evoked nostalgia and class. She didn't just sell objects, she sold stories. A cracked globe became a relic from a traveling professor's private collection. A scratched metal tray, the centerpiece of a 1960s Parisian writer's desk. Buyers loved it. Reviews poured in. So did referrals. Her monthly income doubled, then tripled. She went from making $1,200 to $4,000. But it wasn't about the money. It was about validation. For the first time in her life, she was building something that was hers. Not borrowed, not gifted, not inherited. Hers. One afternoon, while shipping a brass compass to a client in Arizona, Dana caught herself smiling. Really smiling. She pulled out the dollar bill. Yes, she'd kept it. Taped to the inside of her desk drawer, it served as a constant reminder of where she began. She whispered again, this time with pride, don't spend it all at once. The diner job became part-time. Then optional. Then gone. She moved into a slightly larger apartment, one with enough space for a shipping station and a second desk. She hired a college student named Miles part-time to help with listings and packaging. Soon, she started working on her own branded site, cutting out the resale app fees and building direct relationships with buyers. Dana had transformed from a girl mocked with $1 to a woman running a six-figure resale business. She still had sleepless nights, and she was far from comfortable, but she had traction. And somewhere in the back of her mind, she knew, sooner or later, her family would find out. And when they did, she would be ready. Not for revenge. For proof. The first time Dana felt something close to fear in her new life wasn't when she ran out of money or when a package went missing. It was the night she sat at her desk, bleary-eyed, surrounded by boxes stacked to the ceiling, and realized she'd forgotten to eat for nearly 24 hours. Her hands trembled as she labeled a package going to New Mexico. Her breath felt tight. It was like her brain was sputtering from exhaustion. She had made it this far alone, from a single dollar and a bitter sense of injustice to thousands of dollars a month in online sales. But now, she was drowning in her own success. Orders poured in faster than she could handle. Emails, inventory, customer questions, shipping delays, damaged goods, it never ended. And the more she grew, the worse it got. Dana ran everything out of a one-bedroom apartment, which now resembled a chaotic shipping warehouse more than a living space. She hadn't seen the carpet in weeks. Boxes were on her bed, under the table, inside the bathroom closet. Her laptop was duct-taped in 2 places. The floor creaked with every step, like the walls were groaning under the weight of her ambition. She'd made over $11,000 that month alone. But her body was breaking. I either hire someone, she said out loud to her cold apartment, or I'm going to die in a pile of cardboard. The first person she brought in was Layla, a college student majoring in communications. Layla had a knack for handling online messages and managing irate customers with a calm charm Dana didn't have time for. Within days, Dana noticed her stress levels drop as Layla took over listings, inquiries, and returns. Next came Jonah, a detail-obsessed logistics wizard who made sense of the shipping chaos. Jonah created a color-coded system for packaging and organized inventory like he was arranging fine art. Suddenly, missing items were a thing of the past. Then came the real turning point. Mikhail. Mikhail was an ex-corporate procurement guy who'd grown tired of boardrooms and wanted in on something grassroots. He had connections. Real suppliers. Access to liquidation auctions. He helped Dana scale her product selection from local thrift finds to warehouse loads of vintage and retro decor. You're running this like a one-woman flea market, he said after their first week. Let's build you a supply chain. By the end of month 3, Dana had hired a 4th team member, Nadia, a freelance marketer who helped launch their official brand site, Revive Relics. With a modest tad budget and a beautiful, minimalist design, Nadia turned the site into a destination for curated vintage workspace pieces. They weren't just flipping items anymore. They were running a business. They weren't just surviving. They were scaling. The apartment was no longer enough. Dana signed a lease on a small, sunlit loft that functioned as an office, photo studio, and inventory space. Her heart pounded the day she signed the lease. It was $2,400 a month, more than she ever imagined paying. But it was hers. Her risk. Her move. They hosted their first product launch from the space. A mid-century modern collection of rare desk lamps, globes, typewriters, and brass accessories. It sold out in 72 hours. Revenue soared, $30,000 in a single month. Dana stared at her dashboard and blinked in disbelief. But growth brought new challenges. Employees came with questions. Suppliers needed negotiations. Customers wanted faster shipping. Her inbox became a war zone again. One return request turned into a heated online dispute that almost tarnished their public ratings. Another supplier tried to cut her out of an exclusive deal, offering it to a competitor. And then came the hardest part, letting go of control. Dana had always clung tightly to every part of her business. It was her baby. Her lifeboat. Her revenge. Every email, every box, every decision had her fingerprint on it. But if this was going to be more than a hustle, she had to start acting like a leader. So she did. She called a team meeting, her first official one. In a room filled with whiteboards, snacks, and second-hand chairs, she laid it all out. I started this business because I was tired of people telling me what I couldn't do. But if we're going to build something that lasts, I need your ideas, your voices. This isn't about me anymore. It's about us. They clapped. Some awkwardly. Some teary-eyed. From that day forward, Dana became more than just a hustler. She became a CEO. As the team streamlined operations, Dana set her sights on a new frontier, brick and mortar. An actual store. It had been an idea she shelved early on, dismissing it as too risky. But now, with thousands of loyal online customers and a recognizable brand, it made sense. People want to touch the things they buy, she told Mikael one night. They want to walk into a place that smells like old wood and possibility. She scouted neighborhoods, visited empty storefronts, and took notes. Some were too expensive. Others too hidden. But then she found it. A small, triangular corner store with vintage windows and beautiful brickwork. High foot traffic. A tree-lined street. Rent, $2,950 per month. She didn't hesitate. Setting it up cost $40,000. They painted the interior with warm earth tones, hung Edison bulbs from the ceiling, and filled it with their signature pieces, each one labeled with a handcrafted story tag. Opening day was chaos. A line formed outside by noon. Customers flooded in. Instagram influencers posted photos in front of the rustic entrance. Dana walked through the space, heart racing as she overheard someone say, "I've been waiting weeks for this place to open." By 8 p.m., they'd made $9,200 in sales. That night, as she locked up, Dana stood under the amber streetlight and looked through the window. This was real. This was hers. And yet, she knew the world had a way of circling back. She hadn't heard from her family in almost 2 years. But something in her gut said that was about to change. For now, though, she allowed herself one night of joy. One night of success not born of luck or inheritance or family ties. But born of pain, sweat, tenacity, and a dollar they thought would break her. It started with a magazine article. A lifestyle publication had run a glowing feature on revived relics, from nothing to nostalgia, how one woman revived vintage into a thriving brand. The writer described Dana as a visionary entrepreneur with grit and taste, someone who turned overlooked objects, and a single dollar, into a thriving 3-location retail business with a devoted online following. The day the article was published, Dana's inbox exploded with partnership inquiries, press requests, and new orders. And then, the text came. From her father. "Proud of you, kiddo. Let's catch up. Family dinner this weekend?" She hadn't heard from Everett Whitmore in 2 years. Not since he watched her leave the will reading with nothing but a dollar and didn't say a word. She stared at the message for a long time before locking her phone and tossing it aside. But it didn't end there. Later that week, Elena messaged her on Instagram. "Saw the article. So proud of you. We should collaborate. I have this really cool concept that I think you'd love." Light bulb emoji. Dana snorted. Elena, the golden child. The girl who laughed in her face the day she was left with nothing. Now playing the supportive sister, as if years of neglect and mockery could be erased with emojis and business pitches. Dana didn't respond. But the flood had begun. The next week, Dana returned from her third store's soft launch to find a woman waiting at the front door of her original location. Lipstick perfect, voice high, wearing perfume that still triggered old memories of over-choreographed family holidays. Clarice. Her stepmother. "Darling," she exclaimed like they were old friends. "Look at you. I knew you had it in you." Dana didn't smile. "What do you want?" Clarice feigned a wounded expression. "Is that any way to greet family?" Dana stepped aside, unlocked the door, and walked in without inviting her. Clarice followed anyway. "I just think it's time we started over," she chirped. "This business is impressive, and honestly, Elena and your father, well, we've been talking. We think you should bring us in." Dana turned, slowly. "Bring you in?" "Yes," Clarice said as if it were obvious. "Form a family corporation. Share the success. You can't run everything forever, darling. You need help. Help. From the same people who'd watched her drown and handed her a bucket full of holes. She looked Clarice in the eye and said flatly, "You're not getting a cent." Clarice pursed her lips. "That's unfortunate. We were hoping to approach this like adults." Dana gave a short laugh. Adults don't laugh at a young woman getting humiliated in a lawyer's office and then crawl back when she turns that dollar into something real. 3 days later, she got an invitation. Dinner at the family estate. Out of morbid curiosity, and perhaps the need to finally say aloud what she'd held in for years, Dana went. The house hadn't changed. The same marble floors. The same massive chandelier. The same cold air that made everything feel rehearsed. Elena, Clarice, Everett, everyone sat around a long dining table with empty plates and fake smiles. "Dana," Everett began, trying out a voice that sounded both businesslike and parental. "We've been impressed. And we think it's time to make things right." She raised an eyebrow. "By doing what?" "Integrating the business into the family trust," Elena said, sliding over a manila envelope. "You'd still own a big share. 40%. But the rest would be split among the family. We'd handle operations, funding, expansion." Dana stared at the envelope, then looked back up. "You think because we share blood, you deserve a piece of what I built?" Elena shifted. "Don't look at it like that. Look at it as synergy." Dana stood, slowly. "I've had to fight for every cent. While you all vacationed in Italy with Horace's money, I was scrubbing diner floors. I didn't have synergy then. I had survival." She placed the envelope back on the table. "And this business? It's mine. I built it with what you gave me, $1 and a reason." Everett's voice lowered. "Don't be stubborn, Dana. This is your chance to be part of the family again." Dana stepped back and smiled coolly. "You had your chance to be family the day you left me in that room with nothing." And she walked out. But the Whitmores weren't done. They pivoted. Within a week, Dana's lawyer called her in a panic. "They're trying to register a business under a nearly identical name. Same font, same branding. If they get the license, it could confuse your customers and undercut your value." Dana's chest burned. They couldn't get in through the front door, so they were sneaking in the back. Trying to copy her. Hijack her identity. Profit off her work without lifting a finger. She moved fast. Registered her trademark. Filed a cease and desist. Secured brand rights. Tightened every legal bolt she could find. A day later, Elena called her. "This is ridiculous. It's just business. We could have resolved this without lawyers." Dana didn't even pretend to be polite. "You stole my name. That's not business. That's desperation." Elena sighed. "We just want everyone to win." "No," Dana said. "You want to win because you've already lost." And she hung up. The fallout came quick. Elena's copycat brand was taken down by a court injunction. Everett's business accounts, attempted under her brand, were frozen. Clarice was hit with a lawsuit for brand infringement. And the cherry on top? When they tried to secure a bank loan to start their own resale business, the application was denied due to outstanding personal debts Dana hadn't known about but now watched unravel in public. Suddenly, the empire that mocked her rise was crumbling. And Dana? She was featured on the cover of a new entrepreneur spotlight, building from the bottom, Dana Whitmore's Vintage Revolution. Every time her name hit a headline, the Whitmores gritted their teeth. But they could do nothing. She had locked the gate. They were wolves on the other side, shut out for good. It was a cool spring morning, the kind that arrived with soft breezes and sun-dappled sidewalks. Dana ducked into a neighborhood cafe near her third store to grab her usual, black coffee with a splash of oat milk. As she stepped inside, she felt the familiar buzz of calm and control, a sensation she'd come to cherish. She was no longer the woman clawing her way out of debt. No longer the girl who stood at the back of a courtroom, humiliated by a dollar bill and silence. She was Dana Whitmore, founder and CEO of a rapidly expanding vintage lifestyle brand. 3 stores. Dozens of employees. A name that now appeared regularly in business interviews and curated design blogs. But fate has a way of throwing ghosts in your path when you least expect it. In the far corner of the cafe, hunched over a table littered with legal papers and a half-drunk espresso, sat Elena. Dana paused. Her steps slowed. She hadn't seen her half-sister in person since that disastrous family dinner and the failed hostile takeover attempt. Elena looked smaller now. Her designer coat was wrinkled. Her signature golden curls tied in a limp bun. Her nails were chipped. She was arguing with someone in a suit, likely a lawyer, based on the aggressive whispering and paperwork scattered across the table. Dana glanced down. One paper was angled just enough for her to read the headline. Notice of foreclosure. Their eyes met. Elena's face paled instantly, her lips parting, as if to speak. But Dana only gave her a tight smile, a smile free of gloating, free of venom. Just final. And then she turned and walked away. She didn't look back. That night, Dana sat in her home office. The dollar bill, now framed in an ornate gold edge, still hung over her desk. A reminder of the beginning. A relic of the rejection that built her empire. She opened her laptop to respond to comments on the article that had gone viral again after a recent podcast appearance. The story of her rise from humiliation to success had struck a nerve. Thousands of messages poured in, a sea of encouragement, criticism, and unsolicited advice. One comment read, "They're still your family. Doesn't that mean anything to you?" Another, "You let greed turn you cold. Congratulations, I guess?" Dana sighed. She'd expected these. But it still stung. She began typing a response, not for them, but for herself. For clarity. For closure. "You think I'm cruel. You think I became greedy. You think I should have forgiven them because family is family. But let me tell you something. When I was scrubbing floors at a diner, they were drinking wine at the estate. When I was living off ramen and flea market flips, they were cashing inheritance checks and booking European vacations. They didn't reach out when I was starving. They reached out when I was successful. They didn't offer help, they demanded a cut. They mocked me, then tried to steal from me. And when I defended what I built, they called me selfish. Do I feel good watching them fall? I'll be honest, yes. There's a part of me that relishes the justice. Because it's not revenge. It's balance. But that doesn't mean I'm heartless. Sometimes, I remember Elena and I racing through the vineyard paths as kids, our laughter echoing in the summer heat. I remember my father lifting me onto his shoulders when I was small, before he stopped seeing me. I remember Clarice brushing my hair in front of the mirror before school, humming a tune she never finished. There were moments. Good ones. They don't disappear. But they don't erase what came after, either. Will I forgive them? Maybe someday. But forgiveness is not the same as permission. And I will never again give them permission to take what's mine. She clicked post. Weeks passed. The world kept turning. Her business thrived. She opened her fourth store, a flagship location in downtown Chicago. Press coverage followed. She was invited to keynote a Young Entrepreneurs Summit. At the closing panel, someone from the audience asked her what advice she had for anyone who felt left behind by their family. Dana smiled. "Start with what you have, even if it's only pain," she said. "Turn it into purpose. Because success isn't just about proving them wrong. It's about proving to yourself that you were always enough." The crowd rose to their feet. Months later, the phone rang. Her assistant answered, then handed her the receiver, looking unsure. "It's your father." Dana took a deep breath. She hadn't spoken to Everett since that night at the estate. She considered not taking the call. But something in her told her to listen. "Dana," his voice was rough, older, tired. "I just wanted to say. We were wrong. All of us." Silence. "I don't expect you to forgive us. I just wanted you to know." She didn't respond right away. Eventually, she said, "I know." And she hung up. On the first anniversary of her business's first sale, Dana walked into her flagship store and pulled out a tiny display case from the back. Inside it, she placed something sacred. A single framed dollar bill. The placard below it read, "The beginning. Not a gift. A reason." Customers paused to look at it, not knowing the full story. Just sensing the weight. And Dana, now years removed from the pain, stood at the center of her creation, unshaken, unclaimed, and unapologetically her own. The wolves had come. And she didn't just survive. She built a fortress from the bones of their laughter.